page 4. Now again, this handout, I don't know, it really doesn't say lecture, it says nervous system, okay, and then it says function right under that, as compared to the handout that says nervous system practical, which again I just brought as what you could say ancillary material, okay. Lobes of the cerebrum, there's nothing much to draw or, you know, but out of the literally 6 lobes, remember I said there are 6 lobes. When you're looking on the brain, it's hard to identify the 5th lobe from the 6th lobe. If you go back to the lobes, frontal lobe is under the frontal bone, parietal lobe is under the parietal bone, temporal lobe is under or in behind the temporal bone, blah, 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 okay? Where are the limbic or central lobe? They're inside, you know, they're not really adjacent to the bone. They're closer to that section called the corpus callosum, the letter C, okay? But sometimes it's even hard to tell limbic from central. So when, you know, when I do this for lab, you're not my lab group, but I kind of lump those together. But all right, lobes of the cerebrum. The frontal lobe specifically is your motor area for voluntary muscles. So anytime you want to move a skeletal voluntary muscle, okay, the impulse comes from this area of the brain, all right? Broca's speech area. All right, if you have damage to your frontal lobe of the cerebrum, I don't know, however you would have damage, an auto accident, you smash your, you know, frontal bone into, I don't know, the windshield. Sounds awful, but this is life, okay? You may have trouble talking, or actually what is called a stroke. A stroke, it's not on here, but it just popped into my mind. A stroke is a blockage of blood to the brain. If you don't get blood to the brain, your brain is not getting oxygen, it's not getting food. The brain cells, after a certain amount of time, actually start to die. Our neurons, we claim they do not regenerate. There is some information now that maybe they do, okay? But they don't, you know, your chapter will tell you neurons do not undergo mitosis. They do not regenerate, you know. So once a neuron dies, we say theoretically it's gone, okay? Neurons have no, the organelles for mitosis, they have no centrioles. Remember this, folks, okay? So if you have a stroke and it's a, you know, a loss of blood to your frontal lobe, the stroke victim may not be able to speak, or they may have slurred speech. This, by the way, is very common with strokes. It's just one of the ways that strokes occur is very often it does hit the frontal lobe, all right? Okay, anyway, parietal lobe, sensory, tactile, reception. Now, sensory, again, that word, you know, so you really kind of digest what's being said here. Sensory is incoming, okay? Tactile is touch. Okay, so if somebody hits you, whether it's on the face or on the leg, okay, that, you know, that hit, that's tactile reception, that's touch reception, okay? That impulse will go into the parietal section of the brain, okay? And again, you know, primary somatic. Somatic, you know, is peripheral nervous system, but it still means sensory, incoming, okay? Primary sensory area, all right? It's also your area for gustation. Gustation is the fancy word for taste, okay? If people don't know that. Tactile is touch, gustation is taste. Okay, so when you say, you know, oh, this tastes sweet, or this tastes bitter, or whatever, you know, this, you know, sense of taste is being carried by neurons literally from your tongue into the parietal lobe of the brain, okay? Occipital lobe, all right? Primary visual area, okay? Maybe in lab, did you learn the optic chiasma in lab? Did you learn that? Okay. Your optic chiasma, the optic nerve that, leaves the back of the eyeball and goes into the brain, this is going into the, occipital lobe of the brain, okay? So it's your occipital lobe that is in charge of vision, okay? Think about that. Occipital is the back of the head. Most stroke victims do not have problems with the back of the head. So when you have a typical stroke patient, they may have trouble with their speech, but they can see. For those of you who are going into, say, nursing, not all of you will be going into nursing, but just the idea, you may all, depending upon where you're going, be dealing with stroke patients. And this kind of makes sense. You really don't have a lot of damage back here. All right, that's more rare. It's just in general more rare. Okay, so occipital is visual. Okay, temporal. What do you think temporal is, folks? What? You should know this by now. Okay, ear. Yeah, the external auditory meatus. Okay, into the temporal bone. So this is your auditory area. This is the area that receives the sense of, literally hearing. Okay, we also say the temporal is in charge of our emotions, okay, and memory, which is, just interesting, okay, emotions and memory. Okay, limbic, as I said again, this is inside, okay, limbic, thinking, which is not necessarily memory. Thinking is, like, oh, let me think about it. What will I do tomorrow morning? Okay, that's not necessarily memory. They can be related, but it's not the same thing. Okay, and olfaction, by now you should know. I hope you know this word olfaction by now. There's several reasons that you should from lab. Okay, olfaction is what? The sense of smell. Okay, do you know this, folks? Mm-hmm. All right, okay, sense of smell. All right, smell goes in your nasal cavity, is captured by the dendrites of what's called the olfactory nerve. I'm trying to have you relate to lab. The olfactory nerve, the dendrites go up through the cribriform plates of the ethmoid bone on each side of the crista galli. See, there you go, okay? And into the brain, carrying smell into the brain. So olfaction, smell. Central, which is also known as the insular lobe, this is also an inner lobe, it doesn't touch the bone, is your autonomic nervous system. And again, just going back to page 1, and I had said, you might not think that's important, but that organization of the nervous system really is important, because then it helps you put things into little, categories or boxes, whatever you want to call them. Where is it? I'm looking for over here. Okay, organization, autonomic nervous system. Your brain being in contact with your internal organs and glands, and what's going on with those internal organs and glands. Okay, all right. Diencephalon. Okay, we did the cerebrum. If you go back up to the brain embryonic sections, okay, the diencephalon is the second section of the brain that, that kind of develops anterior to posterior in a fetus. In general, it is called the thalamus region of the brain. And I don't know, Hafner may have taught you this in lab, but if I was to do a rough drawing, okay, of a sagittal view of the brain. So here's, the brain kind of, that's supposed to be the brain stem. So this is anterior ventral, and this way is posterior dorsal. There is your letter C, okay, called the corpus callosum. And my sheet should have told you, I don't remember, did it say it? The corpus callosum is made up of white matter on the brain. The gray matter is on the outside. The white matter is on the inside. It is opposite of the spinal cord. The spinal cord, the gray matter is on the inside. It's your butterfly. I like to say gray butterfly. okay, and the white matter is on the outside. So the brain is opposite of the the corpus callosum is white matter that holds the two hemispheres of the brain, the cerebrum, together, okay? But here's your corpus callosum. I'm just going to go CC. Under the CC, you have to use your imagination. There's an oval. Did he do this?
Yes.
Okay, the oval is called the thalamus, okay? And actually it has a dot in it. I don't know if he did this, called the massa intermedia. That actually also helps to hold the hemispheres of the brain together. Above the thalamus, so that's why the diencephalon is called the thalamus region of the brain. Okay, above the thalamus, and a word for above the thalamus, epi, like epidermis means above the dermis. The epidermis, the epithalamus above the thalamus literally is, okay, an endocrine gland called the pineal gland. Okay, and actually if you looked at brains in the lab, there's a reason I made this pink. On the brains in lab it is pink, okay? All right, so there's your pineal gland. Some people pronounce it pineal, okay? I don't, I tend to go with the Latin pineal, okay, pineal gland, okay? Then if you go below the thalamus, the word for below the thalamus, hypo, below, like hypodermis, hypothalamus, but go forward, there's a triangular region, and this is the hypothalamus, okay, here, hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is intensely important, not just in the endocrine system, homeostasis, all right? It's really an amazing section of the brain. I'm over-exaggerating size here, but coming off the hypothalamus is a stalk or a stem, and this stalk or stem is called the infundibulum. Did you learn this? Okay, hanging from that infundibulum is another endocrine gland. It's described as a P-shaped or P-sized gland. The what? Anybody know? Pituitary gland. No, you didn't do this in lab? Okay, and I'll remind you something about the pituitary. It sat in a bone called the sphenoid, but in a little saddle of the sphenoid, here's the saddle called the sella turcica. That's right. I'm very sloppy here, Dad. Tell us, yeah. Okay. This is the diencephalon region of the brain. You know, not really corpus callosum, but what we just covered here. So if you look at my sheet, it says pineal gland, endocrine system. The pineal gland is very light sensitive. It regulates our response to night and day, but winter and summer. Some people get what's called winter depression, and it's all based in this pineal gland not getting enough light. It is darker in the winter. There's less sun than there is in the summer. So some people get depressed in the wintertime. They get winter depression because they're not getting enough light. And if it's really severe, what they do is they tell the patient, lie under lights, okay? But one of the natural things to do just for anybody is get out in the sunlight more, even though there's less sunlight in the wintertime. Just get outside more. Okay, yeah.
Where is the epithalamus?
The epithalamus is the pineal gland. Here, in pink. It's above the thalamus. Got it?
Okay.
All right, okay. So I'm just reading from the sheet. There's pineal gland. It produces a hormone called melatonin. And again, melatonin is your responses to day and night, or winter and summer. You know, day and night, winter and summer are the same kind of concept. More light, less light. Okay, you'll talk about melatonin more in the endocrine system in AMP2. That's actually the way AMP2 begins, with the endocrine system, and really looking at, you know, glands like the pineal gland. All right, thalamus, We said massa intermedia is the adhesion, meaning, adhesive glue that also helps hold the two halves of the brain together. The thalamus is a sensory relay station. This word relay, did you ever do a relay race? Somebody runs up and they hand whatever they hand, I don't know, an envelope, okay, to another person who grabs the envelope and then runs to another person and then hands that person an envelope. That's a relay, okay? So the thalamus relays your 5 senses, okay? In other words, when we just did the lobes of the cerebrum, we said, frontal is for speech, and temporal is for hearing, and occipital is for vision or sight. All of your senses, whether you're smelling or tasting or feeling or hearing or seeing, come into the thalamus, and the thalamus relays it. So the thalamus says, oh, this is hearing. I'm going to send you to the temporal lobe. This is, sight, vision. I'm going to send you to the occipital lobe. Understand? Okay? It's relaying to the respective lobe of the cerebrum that deals with that particular sense. All right? Our 5 senses, hearing, vision, whatever, smell, taste, feeling, okay, tactile. All right. Hypothalamus, okay, is the location technically where the optic chiasma is. Optic chiasma is your optic cranial nerve number 2. And, chiasma means X. So one cranial nerve from one eyeball crosses over the other cranial nerve from the other eyeball. Therefore, you're literally seeing the left side of the room with your right eye and the right side of the room with your left eye. And when you look around the room, you're saying, well, I think I'm seeing correctly, but your brain has learned to compensate from when you were a baby, okay? And your brain understands that it's seeing things flipped in mirror image, and your brain compensates and flips it. And it flips it so well that you're subconscious that the brain is doing this. However, people who have trouble flipping, they're what? Dyslexic. Did he talk about this? No? All right. Does this make sense to you now, though? Okay? Yeah. In a way, people who are dyslexics are actually seeing things correctly. Their brain is not flipping. Okay? Our brain is flipping, but it does it so well, we're not aware our brain is doing this. Okay? So our brain is flipping a mirror image. Okay, so the optic chiasma, where the left optic nerve crosses over the right optic nerve, is located, near this hypothalamus region. It's right under here, kind of. There's that optic chiasma. What else? Well, I already have it here. Infundibular stalk to pituitary gland. In the hypothalamus region is also mammillary. Now, don't get this mixed up with mammary, okay? Your mammary glands are your breasts for milk production, okay? And you can giggle, but by the way, both men and women have mammary glands. Men's don't produce milk because of hormones, okay? They don't develop. Women's do, but both sexes have mammary glands, but don't get mammary mixed up with mammillary, okay, folks? Mammillary bodies, and mammillary bodies involve swallowing. So if a person has trouble swallowing, it's going from this section of the brain. There's something happening with their mammillary bodies. Got it? Okay, let's keep going. Hypothalamus, I already said it's an amazing part of the brain. What is it in charge of? Homeostasis. It is the main part of your autonomic nervous system, your brain controlling. It works with the central insular lobe of the cerebrum, but it really is, significant control in terms of your autonomic internal organs and glands. It controls the endocrine system. The hypothalamus, it's made out of neurons. It's part of the brain, but it is also considered part of the endocrine system. So it's both neural and endocrine at the same time. It's also in charge of water balance, thirst, hunger, appetite, body temperature, anger, sexual behavior, sleep. That's a mouthful. Okay, all right. Okay, any questions? Because, you know, we have today to get through this, and I really think we should not have a problem, but, you know, I don't know, we've got to get through this. Okay, today. All right, any questions? Okay, the midbrain, the mesencephalon. Again, as a fetus, here, if you're looking sagittally like this, the cerebrum develops, then the diencephalon develops, then the middle develops, midbrain, mesencephalon. Then what's called the metencephalon develops, then the myelencephalon develops. Again, we're going back to this paragraph here that says embryonic sections, okay? But your mesencephalon has two major areas. Again, it is the middle of the brain, the midbrain. The peduncle, well, I actually have three areas here, but the peduncle, the corpora quadrigemina, and the red nuclei, okay? Cerebral peduncle, okay? Within this area is a smaller area called the substantia nigra. The substantia nigra releases a neurotransmitter, which floods synapses between neurons. This neurotransmitter is called dopamine. Did he talk about dopamine at all in lab? He may not have, because I usually don't talk much either in lab. You don't have a lot of time. You have what you can get done in lab, you get done, okay? Dopamine is a fascinating neurotransmitter. If a person produces too much, they then have Parkinson's disease, and they have muscle tremors. Their skeletal muscles are constantly being excited, okay? So they have these muscle tremors. That's part of what Parkinson's disease is. However, then you're going to say, well, you know, it's better if we all have a little less dopamine. But if you don't have enough dopamine, then you actually end up with the psychological disease or psychiatric disease known as schizophrenia. So dopamine is fascinating, okay? It is a chemical neurotransmitter released at the synapses, you know, the spaces of these neurons. Remember, the entire brain is neurons, elaborate neurons, but they're neurons. It's released from these neurons that are called the substantia nigra neurons in the peduncle region, okay? We have 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Cranial nerve 3 and 4, attached to this area of the brain. Okay, 2, corpora quad. And almost like if you're taking a test, don't forget about the stuff after quad. Just recognize corpora quad. Do you follow what I'm saying, folks? I mean, I'll have the whole word there, but just pick up on that essential part. Corpora, body, quad, body of 4. Body of 4 what? Okay, there's 2 superior colliculi and 2 inferior colliculi. If you add 2 plus 2, you get 4. And when we say 2 superior colliculi, 1 for the left hemisphere, 1 for the right hemisphere. The same with the inferior colliculi. 1 for the left hemisphere, 1 for the right hemisphere. Everybody follow this? Okay. Your superior colliculi are your visual reflex center. What we mean by that, if you see a car speeding toward you, you are going to visually have a reflex. What? Not to stand there and let the car run over you, although you can mentally override your reflexes. You can say, no, I'm not going to run. I'm going to let this car run me over. Okay, all right? But typically, what would you do if you saw a car flying towards you? you'd either run back to the sidewalk or try to run quicker across the street. You're gonna run. That's a reflex. That's visual. You're responding to what your eyes are seeing, okay? And that's your superior colliculi. Then there's your inferior colliculi, and they're auditory. So for example, you're in the library and everything's quiet and you're studying, and then all of a sudden somebody goes, boom, and what? You jump, okay? You heard something and you didn't know what you heard, okay? Until your brain processes, oh, that's just some idiot dropping a book, okay? You're jumping. Why are you jumping? Because you're hearing something. Hey, is that a bomb going off? Should I get off of my butt and run out the door? All right, this is auditory reflex. So, or when somebody, claps loud and you jump, okay? That's your auditory reflex. Everybody appreciate that? It is the reflex arc, folks, okay? But you're responding, you're jumping until you kind of figure out, well, oh, yeah, that was just a book or somebody clapping, just relax. I don't have to run anywhere, okay? That's auditory reflex, and that's your inferior colliculi, okay? What are we up to? Red nuclei, it is also in the mesencephalon or midbrain, and this gives us what is called our inherent muscle tone. Okay, you don't have to be working your muscles if you're just lying in bed like a blob. You have muscle tone. Okay, you have, muscle maintaining what we call, it's not a true contraction in the sense of muscle shortening, but it is muscle tensile strength. When newborn babies are born, they go through a test called the APGAR test. And part of the APGAR, have you ever heard of this? Part of the APGAR test is, the nurse or the physician assesses the newborn baby's muscle tone, okay? And that's the red nuclei of the brain, okay? Metencephalon, any questions before I move on? Okay, metencephalon, okay? Metencephalon consists of the cerebellum and the pons. And when you looked at the brain in sagittal view in the lab, here I'm going to use this drawing here, okay? All right, back over here, this actually comes out a little bit more, was your cerebellum, okay, cerebellum over here, okay? And actually, all right, I'm kind of trying to make my picture look bigger or better, okay? And there's a little oval over here, so this is the cerebellum. This oval is the pons, okay? Did you look at a sagittal section of the brain in lab? Yes? Okay, do you know what I'm talking about then? Okay, all right, so cerebellum and pons are the metencephalon, okay? The cerebellum, like the cerebrum, it has two hemispheres. There's a white stem that connects one hemisphere of the cerebellum to the other, and this is called the vermis. So the vermis is, your glue that connects the two hemispheres of the cerebellum together. The cerebellum, it doesn't have deep gyri and sulci the way the cerebrum did, but it still does have gyri and sulci. And if you don't remember that language, gyri is hills and sulci is valleys. The surface is not smooth, okay? There's hills and valleys, okay? All right, there's raised parts and deeper parts or grooves. So gyri and sulci, the cerebrum has that also. Again, the whole brain, outer gray matter, inner white matter. The inner white matter of the cerebellum, here we go, looks like a tree, literally called the tree arbor vitae of life, tree of life. Everybody saw this in lab? Yes, no, maybe? Okay, good. There's your arbor vitae, tree of life. That's your white matter of the cerebellum. okay? The cerebellum, basically this neuron cell of the cerebellum is known as a Purkinje cell, okay? It has special neurons called Purkinje cells, but these are neurons. The cerebellum is in charge of muscle coordination and balance. When you drink, and I hope you drink because you're of age, but when you drink, okay, of legal age, the first place in the brain that the alcohol goes to is the cerebellum. The cerebellum is in charge of muscle coordination and balance, so if you've had a little too much to drink, you don't have good muscle coordination and balance. You walk with a drunken sway. Did he talk about this in lab? Okay, yeah, all right. The pons. Pons in French, anybody here speak French? It means bridge, okay? And you know, it kind of bridges the cerebellum to the cerebrum. It bridges major portions of the brain together, okay? It says here, yeah, to the medulla, which is over here. So it's a bridge area. Cranial nerves, 5, 6, 7. We always use Roman numbers with cranial nerves, but people sometimes don't like them, okay? But that there is 5, 6, 7, okay. However, the pons is part of your area of the brain that controls your ability to breathe, to inhale and exhale. You can be asleep, but you're still going to inhale and exhale, because if you don't, you're going to be dead. Okay, so this is the respiratory center of the brain. And this respiratory center of the pons, there's a little section called the apneustic area and a little section called the pneumotaxic area. So the apneustic and pneumotaxic areas are your respiratory centers for breathing, for keeping you inhaling and exhaling and keeping you alive, okay? Becomes very, very important. The respiratory center of the pons, for what it's worth, doesn't work by itself. It works in coordination with the medulla oblongata, okay? But part of the pons does get involved in breathing. So when we get to talk about the respiratory system in A&P2 in 132, whether you have me for a teacher or not, as you go on to 132, you will hear about the apneustic and the pneumotaxic area. Okay, very, very important when you do what's called the respiratory system chapter. All right, last section of the brain, the myelencephalon. Okay, the myelencephalon is the medulla oblongata. Okay, so that's here. Is your medulla oblongata right here. You know, some people can say it's the brain stem. That's kind of sloppy language, but people use that language, okay? You know, it's the ending of the brain. It's the most posterior and actually inferior portion of the brain, okay? It becomes the spinal cord. So just to use a different colored chalk, okay? Here, you know, the medulla becomes SC, the spinal cord, all right? There is a place where you can say, oh, this is the medulla and this is the spinal cord, but really it's almost continuous, okay? So the medulla becomes the spinal cord going down into the trunk of the body trunk. Okay, cranial nerves 8 through 12 come off the medulla oblongata, and there it is, okay? It controls heart rate and respiratory rate. We already talked about respiratory, but the medulla also keeps your heart beating. So very, very crucial to life, folks, okay? You could say the whole brain is, but this really, okay? Let me see. The medulla, well, all right. These are, again, voluntary motor, meaning your skeletal muscles down to the spinal cord and out to your various skeletal muscles of the arms, the legs, the body trunk. Okay, but this last sentence here, these descending motor, okay, areas of the medulla oblongata, they do what is called decussate. Decussate is the word that's used, but decussate simply means cross over. So in other words, it kind of looks like this, and sometimes it's not easy to draw this, okay. This will do this, and that will do that. Okay, like that X. They decussate. Understand what I'm saying, folks? Okay, I don't know if I drew that clearly here. I don't know, I never know how to draw it. It's hard to draw, okay? But I'm just trying to show you an X, okay? Here, this goes this way, and this goes this way. All right, so here in the middle, this goes this way, and actually this goes, no, I gotta go out more. This goes this way. Oh, there, that's a pretty good drawing. Okay, although I still didn't do it perfectly, okay? They cross, like your optic chiasma, all right? This means that the left side of the medulla oblongata is telling your right skeletal muscles to operate, and vice versa. Understand? Left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, and actually my sheet says it the other way, but it's still the same idea. Right side of the brain controls left side of the body. Okay? It's because of this decussation. It's very important. Any questions? Any? Okay. All right. We finished now the central nervous system. My sheet says peripheral, but I'm going to remind you, what is the peripheral nervous system? Well, for 1 minute, if you want, you don't have to, but you can go back over here to my general function outline. Peripheral nervous system. All of your neurons or bundles of neurons known as nerves, okay, that are not the central nervous system. In other words, they're not the brain, they're not the spinal cord, but they're going to attach to the brain or the spinal cord, okay? So if they attach to the brain, they're called cranial neurons. If they attach to the spinal cord, they're called spinal neurons, or you can say nerves, because neurons, bundle into what we call nerves, okay? And the peripheral, again, going back to that page 1 of my handout, there's the somatic nervous system that deals with your external environment, and your autonomic nervous system that deals with your internal environment, okay? So you have 12 pairs of cranial pairs, because we have, a right ear and a left ear, and a right eye and a left eye, and a right arm and a left arm. 12 pairs of cranial nerves. The cranial nerves can go into the brain. They can be sensory, or they can go away or out of the brain. They can be what? Motor, okay? The same with your spinal neurons. We already did the spinal cord. The dorsal root, what? Of the spinal cord was incoming or sensory. All right? We did this Tuesday. And the ventral motor, outgoing root, outgoing motor. All right? But you have 31 pairs of spinal nerves. You've already learned that. But in a nutshell, this is your peripheral nervous system. Okay? And we're almost done with, we have to get through this page, but we're getting there. All right, I'm happy. Okay, I want to make sure that, we're going to get there. Okay, the somatic nervous system first. Again, I might say it here instead of just reminding you, but this is on page 1 of my handout. Somatic neurons deal with our information about the external environment, the world outside of our body. How do we know about that world? Through our 5 senses. We see it, we hear it, we smell it, we taste it, we feel it, okay? I always say, if you couldn't see or hear or smell or feel you would still exist. You just would not know that there was a world outside of your body. Okay? It's pretty scary to think about that. Take away your senses. You know what I mean? You just, yeah. Okay, you'd be there. You'd be oblivious that there's anything going on outside of your body. Okay, it's voluntary, meaning that, you know, we'll respond to what we see, hear, smell, taste, feel with our voluntary skeletal muscles. We already did the reflex arc. The reflex arc is, for the most part, somatic, okay, to skeletal muscles. And this you know already. Dorsal rami of spinal nerve is sensory. Ventral rami of spinal nerve is motor. The ventral rami converge to form a plexus. All right? Did he do this in lab?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Sometimes I like to clarify this with a drawing, okay? Because, you know, I don't know how he did it, but sometimes when people see this and I say, this is a plexus, they go, oh, okay. So give me a second, you know, sometimes, because I can just read it and you can say, yeah, I understand, and I can keep going, but you have your spinal cord. You know, this is the spinal cord. You can put a brain up here if you want, okay? And there's 31 pairs of nerves that come off the spinal cord. I don't have to do 31 pairs. You know, here, okay, here, and that's enough. Let's just do those, okay? But your spinal nerve, okay, what did my sheet say? It's several ventral rami. These are your spinal nerves, okay? But then we said it's split into a dorsal ramus and a ventral ramus, right? And I might also remind you that off of the ventral came the what? Communicating. Anybody remember this? Okay, we don't need that right now, okay? So dorsal, ventral, dorsal, ventral, dorsal, ventral. Your ventral, which is motor or outgoing. So that's this one, this one, this one, and this one. Sometimes they unite. And when they unite, this is a plexus. So you may not have learned it this way, but sometimes when people see it like this, I don't know, they just get it better, okay? It's your motor rami, your ventral rami converging. This becomes a plexus. Plexi is plural, more than one plexus, okay? All right, so now the next part of the sheet says plexi, all right? There are 5 of these convergences, 5 of these plexi in the body, okay? And only 5, all right? So the first one is called the cervical. This is in the neck region, okay? It gives rise to a nerve. So in other words, off of this will come a nerve here. Let's have a nerve coming off of here. Okay, here's a nerve coming off the plexi, okay? So if this is the cervical, this nerve coming off is called the phrenic nerve. The phrenic nerve goes to your skeletal muscle known as the diaphragm. And it actually helps the diaphragm as a skeletal muscle contract. When the diaphragm contracts, it moves downward. When it moves downward, your lungs inflate. When your lungs inflate, you inhale. All right? That's the phrenic. Phrenic to the diaphragm. Okay. Then there's a plexus called the brachial plexus. In general, the shoulder, but, you know, off of what spinal nerves, off of what vertebrae? C5, cervical 6, cervical 7, and T1. Everybody understand that that's what I mean by C5 through T1, okay? Okay, these form this plexus. So you could say cervical 5, 6, you know, whatever, 7, T1 form this plexus called the brachial plexus. Okay, and really we don't say much about, I don't say much about the brachial plexus, but a major nerve that comes off of the brachial plexus is a nerve called the axillary nerve that goes down your arm. Okay, there's no plexi that come off of your thoracic vertebrae spinal nerves, you know, except for T1, which was brachial. So T2 through 12, no plexus, okay? Then we go to the lumbar plexus, okay? Lumbar region, and this in general feeds the stomach and genital region of the body. The lumbar plexi give rise to what is called the, you know, femur, femoral nerve, going down the thigh. And I might also mention that the femoral nerve, for what it's worth, branches into what's called the tibial nerve and the, what do you think? Fibular nerve, okay? All right, where are we? Okay, sacral plexus, your pelvis area, your butt area. This gives rise to a nerve called the sciatic, and that goes to your legs. But the sciatic is posterior. It runs here. Here it is on me, and you can laugh at me pointing at my butt, but here it is. So when you give an intramuscular injection into the gluteus maximus, you're not supposed to go here. You're supposed to avoid hitting the sciatic nerve because you can do damage to it, okay? All right, those of you who someday will have to give injections will learn that. Be careful of the sciatic nerve, you don't want to hit that. It's not that it may do immediate damage, but you know, it's not a good idea to stick a needle into a nerve. You know, just because potentially there can be damage there that can be done. Okay, coccygeal, all right, vertebrae give rise, you know, there is a coccygeal plexus and genital region, and I'll say something that'll wake you up. This gives rise to nerves that have to do with orgasm. Your book might not say that, but I'll say that, okay? All right, so see there, that woke you up, okay? All right, let me see. Okay, well, we did this already. Spinal nerve, external branches. The spinal nerve has a dorsal ramus, a ventral ramus, and a communicating ramus here. I had it here, but then I erased it because we didn't need it here. Dorsal ramus, ventral ramus, and a communicating ramus that comes off of the ventral. But we covered this already, you know, Tuesday. All right, so I don't know, I'm repeating it. Okay, but the communicating ramus is important for the autonomic nervous system. So now let's look at this communicating ramus that branches off of the ventral ramus and, you know, is involved with the autonomic nervous system. Okay, so autonomic nervous system, internal environment, therefore basically involuntary. You can't tell your heart what to do. Your brain can, but you can't voluntarily tell your heart speed up or slow down. Your heart will speed up if you start to run, but that's involuntary. You're not telling it to do it. It's doing it, okay, on its own. You know, involuntary response, okay, to your organs and glands. So therefore, it's going to the muscle that is involved in the walls of our internal organs and glands, smooth muscle, as well as to the heart muscle, cardiac muscle. all right? And this, again, a repetition, uses the communicating ramus off of a spinal nerve, okay? Autonomic nervous system is very involved with homeostasis. If your heart starts to go too fast, this is still homeostasis. Remember my idea here, this of homeostasis? If we're high, we want to lower it. Then if we're low, we're going to turn things back on that make it rise. Your heart is involved in this too. If your heart starts to beat fast, your brain will start to do things to try to slow it down. If your heart starts to go too slow, your brain will do things to try to get it to speed back up, okay? So believe it or not, heart rate is under homeostatic control. I said that way back when, chapter 1 of the semester, when we did homeostasis as a topic, that everything in the body was under homeostatic control, okay? But we talked then more about like calcium levels or water levels, heart rate too, okay? The autonomic nervous system subdivides into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic stimulates or excites, which means it speeds up heart rate or turns on an organ that's not on. Parasympathetic depresses or inhibits, which means it slows down heart rate or turns off an organ. Not an organ, we never turn off organs, turns off a gland, okay, that, might be on and the brain decides I want to turn it off, okay? All right, so sympathetic nervous system, all right, these nerves that we call the sympathetic nerves of the autonomic nervous system, again, nerves, they're just bundles of neurons, okay? They come off of the thoracic and upper lumbar spinal nerves. Thoracic think vertebrae if you want, but we're matching up the spinal cord with the vertebrae. So thoracic vertebrae, thoracic spinal cord, upper lumbar vertebrae or spinal cord. Okay, this is sympathetic. These nerves come out through here, the communicating ramus. I say communicating ramus, but some books switch this, they say ramus communicans. Communicating ramus and ramus communicans are the same thing. Everybody appreciate that, okay? All right, so you have this, nerve coming out, this communicating ramus, all right? That's what it's saying, okay? And it's going to the sympathetic cord, all right? The sympathetic cord, if you jump down to the bottom where it says sympathetic and parasympathetic cord, but right now we are focusing on sympathetic, okay? It's not a true cord. It's a chain of, a second neuron, secondary motor neurons, okay? And they go out to the respective organ or gland, okay? So in other words, you have a neuron that comes here, okay? It's synapses, let's use a different color, with the second neuron that's here. That's the cell body or ganglion of the neuron, understand? A ganglion is a bundle of cell bodies or soma or cytons, okay? It's this neuron, here, there's its axon, that then sends the impulse to the organ or the gland. So it's secondary. This is your primary, it's a secondary. Do people appreciate this? Okay, so we say the impulse is being relayed. It's not going directly here to an organ or a gland. Here's the kidney. It's not going directly there. It's a relay through this secondary neuron. That's what we mean by relay. The impulse is handed off from here to here. Then it gets here. Everybody get this? Okay, now the sympathetic cord, these cell bodies or ganglia line up. And of course, it's balanced. This is your spinal cord. So they line up like this. So this vertical lineup of, again, sympathetic, this is sympathetic nervous system, of ganglia or cell bodies. This is what we casually call the sympathetic cord. It's not a real cord like the spinal cord, but we call it that. Are people getting this? Okay? So it says, down at the bottom, not a true cord, a chain of secondary, relay motor neurons. The sympathetic, it's located on both sides of the vertebral column. Okay, very close to the, well, I have it in more, but very close to the ramus. Okay. Okay, going off to, your organs and glands. All right? And the organ or gland that's being impacted is called the effector organ or gland. So we say it's a peripheral relay system. It uses the neurotransmitter at the synapse called norepinephrine. Another name for norepinephrine is noradrenaline. Did I lose anybody? And then I gave you a picture of this. Okay. Although I just drew it. Now this is cross section. I drew it longitudinally, but there's your sympathetic. We're looking at sympathetic first. There's your first neuron. Here it is synapsing with what I have here in pink on the blackboard. The secondary neuron. On my sheet headed here, it's called the sympathetic ganglion in the so-called sympathetic cord. And actually, I didn't do this on purpose, but this is the kidney here too. Okay. Maybe I did it subconsciously. I realized that's the way the picture was. Okay? Everybody get this for sympathetic? Yes? Okay. Let's look at the parasympathetic. And as we said, parasympathetic slows down, depresses, turns off. So the second to last paragraph on the page, okay? Parasympathetic, these neurons come off, they do come off the spinal cord, but they come off, first of all, it uses cranial nerves coming out of the brain, cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, 10, and they come off the spinal cord sacral vertebrae, sacral region of the spinal cord. Okay, again, out through this same here, where is it? Communicating ramus or ramus communicans. That hasn't changed. Okay, and we say it's going to the parasympathetic cord. But there's no real parasympathetic cord the way there is we talk about a sympathetic cord. All right? I know I have it out, to the parasympathetic cord, but in a way there's no real parasympathetic cord. But again, it's a relay. In other words, a secondary neuron is going to be involved, and it's going to relay the impulse to the organ. So it's still a peripheral relay to the effector organ. Okay, now why did I say there's no real parasympathetic cord? Look at the last sentence on the page. The parasympathetic cord, so-called, is in the wall of the organ itself. In other words, if you're talking about the kidney, it's in the kidney. So look at this picture over here now for parasympathetic, okay? And let me redraw this because this here was sympathetic, okay? Here, there's your kidney, here's your communicating ramus, okay? Communicating ramus goes all the way out and goes to the kidney directly. Then you're going to say, where's the secondary neuron? In pink. Inside the kidney. Here. Do you follow this? That's why I said in a way there's no real parasympathetic cord. When we say parasympathetic cord or sympathetic cord, neither of them are real cords the way the spinal cord is a cord, okay? But at least there's a lineup of sympathetic cell bodies, cytons, that we call the sympathetic cord. When it comes to the parasympathetic, it's specifically inside of each individual organ. Do people get this? It still is a peripheral relay. This will give the impulse to the kidney, okay? But it's different from the sympathetic. Everybody get this? Okay, good. Did you do the cranial nerves in lab?
Only two.
What? Well, he maybe wanted you to know 1 and 2 on the brain, but did you go through all 12?
No.
No, okay. You can look at 2 pieces of paper here on my handout. This page, or this is a list, and then we're done. So we finish now with the cranial nerves. You can read the list, but what I really love about this picture is it shows you what the cranial nerve is doing. It's visual, okay? So just look at the picture and listen to me. Cranial nerve number 1, olfactory. And they're using Roman numbers here, so you have to find Roman number 1. Okay, olfactory is what, folks? Smell, okay? Going from your cribriform plate, do you relate to that? Yeah. Okay? Into the brain, into what's called the olfactory bulb and tract. You said he taught you this in lab, correct? Yeah. It's sensory. It's carrying the sense of smell into the brain. Cranial nerve number 2 is the optic. This also is sensory, into. For what? Vision. Actually, light, okay? I don't know if he taught you this, but if it's pitch black in a room you cannot see, did he talk about that? What our eye really receives is light, okay? So if you really are in a pitch black room, you cannot see. But your eye picks up light and sends it through the optic nerve, sensory, into the brain. The optic nerve comes out of the back of the eyeball. Did he show you this in lab? And again, the 2 optic nerves do the optic chiasma. They cross over each other as they enter the brain. Am I making sense? Am I losing anybody? Okay, so cranial nerve number 2, sensory, carrying light into the brain. Okay, we're going to do 3, 4, and 6 next, and you're going to say, why did you skip a number? All right, well, okay, we'll pick up on that number, but 3 is oculomotor, 4 is trochlear, 6 is abductions. And why am I taking these together? Because they're all going to the muscles around the eyeball to move your eyeball. So if they're going to muscles, they're what? Motor, outgoing. They're not sensory. Make sense? If it's motor, it's always going to a muscle. So 3, oculomotor, 4, trochlear, 6, abductions are motor, outgoing to the muscles around our eyeball to move our eyeball up, down, sideways, this way, that way. Okay? We skipped 5. 5 is called the trigeminal, and it's called the trigeminal because it splits into 3 branches. my sheet does mention, not here in the picture, but the list does mention the names of the 3 branches. I don't really ask you to do that. Don't worry about the names of the 3 branches, but try for 3 branches. And some of those branches are sensory, incoming, and some of those branches are motor, outgoing to muscles. And if you look at the picture, the muscles, especially around the scalp area and the ear, okay? And so this is both sensory and motor. It's called a mixed cranial nerve. It's both sensory and motor. It's mixed, okay? All right, so 5, we already did 6, okay? 7, facial, okay? Facial is also mixed. Some of it is sensory, if somebody slaps your face. Some of it is motor. To what muscles? Do you recognize those muscles?
Yeah.
Frontalis, what? Temporalis, occipitalis, easy muscles. Anybody recognize these muscles? Okay, I hope. All right. So facial, sensory, and motor. Here, this picture. Mixed. Okay. 8 pictures the ear. Did you do the ear in lab?
A little bit.
A little bit. Okay. The inner ear consists of a section called the cochlea, which is for hearing. It looks like a seashell. The ear is also in charge of what is called equilibrium, which is not technically balance, but equilibrium, okay? And that's the other part of the inner ear called the vestibuli and the semicircular canals, okay? So cranial nerve number 8 is called by formal name the vestibulocochlear, but if you focus on the cochlea portion, it's sensory. It's carrying what? Sound into the brain. Okay, now, having done number 8, sometimes the summaries help. 1, olfactory, 2, optic, and the one we just did, 8, vestibulocochlear for sound, are sensory. There's only 3 cranial nerves that are sensory, ingoing. Okay? All right. 9, let's go to 9. 9 is the glossopharyngeal. Glosso means tongue. Pharyngeal means pharynx or throat. And if you know that, then you understand where it's going. Okay? Tongue and throat. But this is also both sensory and motor. In other words, motor to move the muscles of the throat or the tongue, but also sensory. So if you bite your tongue, it's carried by this into the brain. Glossopharyngeal 9 is mixed. It's both sensory and motor, to and from the tongue and throat. 10, vagus. There's your autonomic nervous system, okay? To all of your internal glands, organs, to your lungs, your heart, your kidney, your stomach, your liver, the intestines, they don't show the spleen, all of that. Autonomic nervous system, cranial nerve number 10, vagus. So the brain has to talk to the heart, and then the heart has to talk back. Sometimes it has to tell the brain what it's doing. So the vagus is also mixed, sensory and motor, okay? Now with the vagus, again, a little summary, and we're just gonna finish this in the nick of time, okay? A little summary, and hang in there if we go a minute over because, you know, mixed, which is sensory and motor. Mixed, okay? 5, 7, 9, 10. Because we just did 10, mixed, okay? Any other number of your cranial nerves that's not up here, they're motor, outgoing. So number 11 is motor, outgoing, the accessory, also called spinal accessory. Do you recognize these muscles? The trapezius and the sterno.
And
Cleidomastoid, okay? Motor out to those muscles. Finally, 12, hypoglossal. Hypo below, glossal tongue. Under the tongue, but motor, moving your tongue muscle. All right? Now, this is the picture, but you have your list here. Okay? So you have to know the cranial nerve, its number, because they never change numbers. Is it sensory or motor or both? And to where or from where? Understand? Okay?
What do you mean from where? Like
If it's sensory, it's going into the brain.
Oh, okay, I think you meant-
If it's motor, it's going out of the brain, but to what muscle?
Okay.
Can we say afferent or efferent?
Afferent is sensory, efferent is motor.
Or can I say?
Yeah,
no,
you
no,
can.
no.
Okay. One last second. Take the first letter of each word. Do you want to know what we all used to do in the medical school? Okay. It's a little off color. Anybody going to be offended?
No.
O, to touch and feel Virginia's glorious vagina at home. Okay? All right. If there were questions, come up and ask, but I'm done and some people want to get out of here. I appreciate that.